Good afternoon, and welcome to our TPEA sponsored Lunch and Learn conversation today. We're going to talk about long-term care 101, kind of the basics in just a moment. My name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors, and I'm joined by Deanna Baucom, our co-host. She is our leader over in the Austin area and West Texas and South Texas and just about anywhere else west of Austin. So appreciate her joining us, as well as Ray Amell, who is the legislative liaison with Texas Public Employees Association. Just a couple of quick housekeeping details before we jump off in here. We are all in a listen only mode for participants, and that means we can't see you, we can't hear you, anything like that, which is fine for you. At the end of the conversation today, we'll stop the recording, and if you have some comments or want to ask a question live, you can do that by holding up your hand on the reaction toolbar, and we can answer questions that way. In the meantime, if you've got a question of Ray or Executive Director Ann Bishop, you can put it in chat or in Q&A. We can respond to that either personally, or if it's a question that the whole group would benefit from, we can do that as well. Deanna and I will be monitoring the chat conversations as we go along here today. We do record each one of these webinars. We put those out on the TPEA website and make sure that you have them available to you in the members section. We'll show you and talk to you about that as well, so you can go back and refer to this, especially this particular webinar. We have many members that will take this and share this with their family members and have that conversation as we go forward. You'll notice down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a QR code. You can open up your camera on your smartphone, hover over that QR code, and a little form will pop up, and you can ask questions about some of the plans we've talked about today. So grab a pen and paper. We're going to give you some websites, some things to write down, some numbers, things like that in our conversation today. But before we jump in there, just a quick reminder, TPEA is constantly working on your behalf. And Ray's going to address this, even though because we're not necessarily in legislative session now, doesn't mean things are not taking place. TPEA is there on your behalf, was there before any of your ERS benefits even took place 75 plus years ago. TPA has been around for you to protect that ERS pension. So big right now, COLA conversations, Ray and Ann are going to talk about that, working about pay raises, work site benefits in terms of returning to work, working from home, alternate ways that you can do that. So it's a wide variety of things that TPEA does on your behalf. And so I want to bring in Ray and Ann right now, and just kind of tell us, Ray, it's summer, it's hot, but that doesn't mean that you and Ann and the crew have stopped doing things on behalf of state employees and retirees. So what's going on, Ray?
John, thank you. That is so true. We, Ann and I have been both by Zoom, and because some of them still prefer Zoom meetings, and in person visiting. We're visiting with legislative offices around the Capitol on both sides of the aisle. And we are trying to convey to them how a compelling need there is for both a pay raise for state employees, given especially the accelerating effects of inflation on your gas. You see it every time you fill up your car with gas, and then of course groceries alone. Those two things alone. We are also emphasizing how inflation has eroded the buying power of the pension dollar, and for those of who are retired. There's not been an increase for retirees for some 20 or so years. So it's definitely time for them to see an increase. And a lot of what happened during the last regular session, supported and promoted by TPEA to shore up the ERS fund, should hopefully put it in a position with some legislative blessing to go ahead and give some increases. I won't get into the details on that right now, but there is a statute which requires them to give a COLA if they're actuarially sound. And that would be to those who retired 20 or more years. And then the 13th check could be given if they had additional funds available to do so to those retirees who were not, who've been retired less than 20 years at that time. But that's not something that will be happening in the next year or so. It might be a couple of years down the pike. But we have, like I said, been going around the Capitol representing you both. There have been some committee hearings. We testified before Senate Finance Committee on the effects of inflation. Dan Maxwell, the president of the TPEA statewide retirees chapter, gave some very effective testimony regarding the effects of inflation on retirees. And and Ann and I submitted testimony. And then also we testified before Senate Business and Commerce Committee regarding the need for agencies to retain flexibility when it comes to work from home or work from alternate work sites, balanced with their working in the office. So kind of the current trend that everybody's in. But I do not want to pass up the opportunity to tell you how much you state employees and you retirees are appreciated. We know, for those of you who've been toiling in the vineyard, so to speak, you've been through the freeze and the fires and the floods, and especially COVID. And yet, by all accounts and by all evidence, the state continues to hum along, and your performance has really kept up. So, and we've told many legislative office that. So thank you for all your service to the state of Texas. And I want to make sure that I give Ann Bishop, the executive director of TPEA, a chance to say a few things. We got the annual meeting coming up. So Ann, you're on mute.
That's because I was getting ready to cough. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ray, and thanks everybody for joining in. As Ray said, we continue to meet with people to talk about your issues and to find resolution to those issues. We are very grateful to all the legislative members who have met with us, as well as all the state agency heads who have met with us. And as we keep going forward and refining requests, we'll keep you up to date and informed on the progress. We do have a TPEA annual meeting. This is required by organizations that are corporations. So ours is usually in June. And we do have one on June 25th from 9 to 12. We'll do it on Zoom or as well as in person. It is at the new ERS annex, part of the building. So the big new building that ERS built in conjunction with their old building is the site of the annual meeting. And so we're excited to be a part of that new opportunity that opens up for state employees and retirees. You are welcome to join us either in person or virtually. We will be going through and announcing the results of the Board of Trustees, Board of Directors election. There are 3 places that become available and 3 candidates will be announced at that time, as well as just some other general updates. But we will keep you up to date and informed. If you can't make it in person or online, we will put a copy of it on our website.
Great, thank you. And again, either way, if you want to come in person or online, make sure you register at tpa.org. When you go out to the website, you'll see an events tab near the top. Drop down, and that's where you can register to be there in person or online to get the Zoom link. Just to the left of that, you'll see the members section. That's where you'll find all of the videos that are out there. Now, I have one question for you before we jump off into the conversation a little deeper. When you're talking about the effects of inflation, whether it be for a cost of living increase, targeted pay raises, things like that, how does the latest stock market activity impact any of that thought process?
Well, I'll take that one. The stock market does have an impact to the fund, the retirement fund. It also has an impact to the general revenue fund and all the funds that the state collects. I'll focus mainly on the retirement fund. The employees' retirement system smooths, or they average out highs and lows in the stock market over 5 years, so that when you have a big high or a big low, all of that's not felt right away. So there is some opportunity to have some stability in the fund from a financial reporting standpoint and from a legislative standpoint as far as the reporting goes. The other issue is that ERS had a great year last year. They had over a 25% return. So they were able to wipe out or take off the books any kind of losses that had been in the past and had been lingering over the past couple of years from 2008 and forward, and other dips in the stock market. So this year, and at the end of the year, ERS, I'm sorry, again, TPEA and ERS interchangeable, but it's ERS, will end of the year, August 31st, close their books, look at the returns, and they're starting with a base of not having a debt to factor in. So they have some gains from last year they're able to factor in. So it will be lower. There's no doubt that the returns will be lower, and that will impact the amount of money that's available for a COLA or a cost of living increase. But with that said, ERS is very well diversified. So the stock market is just one piece of the pie. There are other pieces of the pie, such as private equity and real estate, that offset some of the other dips. So the way they design their asset allocation is that ERS designs it so that if one is either low or extremely high, the other allocations balance it out, or the other asset classes balances out. So we'll see in December what the end result is. We'll have a number at the end of August. They'll close the books. We'll have a number in September on what they think the return is. In December of 2022, ERS will actually receive their actuarial valuation reports, and we'll know exactly where the fund stands at that time.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Ann. I appreciate that. I know that the stock market and COLAs and inflation is on everyone's mind. So thank you for continuing to fight for retirees and active employees as well, especially some of those return to work type issues, things of that nature that can be impactful as well. Just a quick reminder, membership in TPEA is extremely valuable. It helps when Ray and Ann go up to the Capitol and they've got tens of thousands of individuals, state employees, retirees, friends of state employees behind them to carry that message of COLAs, workplace environment, pay raises, things of that nature as well. $7.50 a month for active employees, $2.50 a month for retirees, or for an associate membership who aren't state employees or retirees as well. So we'd highly encourage you to join the TPEA. If you're not a member, we do have a group of folks that join us on these calls that are not, so we want you to join us as well. We've had some questions about who AMBA is. We get this quite frequently. AMBA is Association Member Benefits Advisors. We are based in Austin, founded over 40 years ago, right in Austin. We now serve over 400 client associations in every state in the United States. Most of them are public servant organizations just like TPEA. So think state employees, retired teachers, active educators, nurses, those of you who have taken your career choice to serve the public. And so we help come alongside and increase membership efforts, marketing, and provide benefits and things like that as well, just so that you have the access to not only a strong association and a connection there, but access to benefits and travel plans and fun stuff as well that make the value of your membership go up even more. And part of the advantages of having that benefit of AMBA and TPEA together, it can cover those gaps that aren't covered by your state plan. We're going to talk about one in particular today. If you leave state employment for whatever, whether you retire, go to the private sector, come back, these benefits are portable. You can take them with you because you are a member of TPEA. And one of the biggest reasons that TPEA members appreciate having that the membership benefit is that you can extend your benefits by being a TPEA member to maybe children who have aged out of your state benefits, or to take care of your parents so that you don't have to stop your career and shorten your pension time or shorten your pension factors, things like that. So there's a lot of benefits that you have that come with that. And so in today's Lunch and Learn, we've got some goals we're going to talk about. It's very personal to me. We're going to talk about this concept of long-term care, elder care, and explore some of the myths and facts around it, talk about the need. We're going to give you just a high-level components of a long-term care plan so that you kind of understand if you have a plan already, if you don't have a plan, and show you some options that you may have out there. But before we do that, I want to jump off and have a quick poll just so I can kind of understand who our audience is, I'm going to launch this poll out there. I want you to tell us, do you have a plan? I've got some sort of a plan. Yes, no, I'm not sure. Maybe took it out through the state many years ago. Don't know what I have. So feel free to jump on in there. We've got a really good group of participants that are jumping in and answering this right away. We'll open that up for just a few more seconds. All right, we'll make sure we get about 75, 80% participation, just a few more seconds out there. All right, last call here. We're going to end this poll. Let me share the results. Pretty good mix out here. So we've got about a third of the group that does have some type of a long-term care plan. 60% don't, and there's about 10% of you that aren't sure, which is okay, because oftentimes you think you may have something through the state, you may have something through your healthcare plan. You're not quite sure. We want to help you understand what's out there, what could be out there for you, so that you don't miss something. And the reason we do this is twofold. One, and you should be getting communication from ERS pretty soon about the upcoming ERS meetings all across the state. You have a very solid benefit plan through the state, whether you're a retiree or an active employee. But there's one significant gap that's missing out there that ERS no longer offers, and that's a long-term care plan. And this is not unusual, so don't get mad at ERS. Regardless of whether you worked in the private sector, public sector, in schools, state employment, they used to offer long-term care plans in a group plan setting. They got to be so expensive and so unwieldy that there's companies that stopped providing it altogether. So there's really not a market out there for group plans. And if you come back to our 201 conversation, we're going to go more in depth about that. But just to know that as a state employee, retiree or active, long-term care is no longer offered. So that's why we want to kind of talk about this conversation today, because long-term care goes beyond just taking care of your needs. It could be your parents' needs, but it has an impact on you, your children, your grandchildren through multiple generations. And we're going to go in and explore some of these myths, show you some things in Texas. But the real reason that I'm passionate about this conversation is this picture right here. This is my father and myself back in July of 2020. He was in a nursing home in North Austin, had been in for about 2 years due to complications related to vascular dementia. And this was, like I said, July of 2020 was the last time that he remembered who I was when I went to visit him. He passed away in October later of that year at the age of 80, again, as a result of complications from long-term vascular dementia. And so what my father did back in his early 60s to take care of his long-term care planning greatly impacted my stepmother, greatly impacted my brother and I, and his grandkids. And so I kind of want to weave that journey and that conversation in today, because some of the numbers that you're going to see, some of the concepts you're going to see, I'm going to share how that worked in real life for my father. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. We do record this webinar. It'll be available on the TPEA website under the members section. Share this with your loved ones. If you're getting together this weekend for Father's Day, the website will not have this particular webinar up, but it will have a previous recording of our long-term care conversation. You can have that conversation talking about that. But again, I do this because of what my father did to take care of himself as well as his family going forward. So I want to do a quick quiz for you. And so if you'll grab a piece of paper and write this down at the on the paper, 5 or 6 quick questions. Long-term disability and long-term care are the same thing, true or false? Very few people need any type of extended long-term care, and only people over 50 need long-term care. True or false? Nursing home confinement is the only option for long-term care, or that Medicare or your health insurance plans will pay for everything, and I should just wait until I'm retired. So if you answered true to any one of these questions, that is incorrect. Every one of these questions is false. And we're going to address that as we go through here and kind of show you how different plans work, what Medicare or private insurance, how they interact with long-term care, and the different type of care things that are out there. So all of those were false, but it doesn't change the fact that 70% of us over the age of 65 will need some form of extended care in our lifetime at some point. And it could be meaning recovery care after a fall or after surgery. It could be meaning some sort of care at home just because I'm a safety risk to myself. Or it could mean something as a long-term care situation, much like my father did as a result of just aging or chronic illness, something of that nature. So at some point in our lifetimes, there will be a need for all of us to have some form of care out there. Now, looking at a long-term care policy, and many of you said, I'm not sure if I have a plan, or I think I've got a plan, or I don't have a plan. I want to kind of illustrate this in the making of a good hamburger. So when you're building a good hamburger, you've got a lot of components. Some of them are required to be a hamburger. You don't have a hamburger if you don't put your meat source and some buns around it. Others are optional, like your condiments, things like that, your toppings. So a long-term care plan, a traditional type of long-term care plan, is built around what would qualify you to receive benefits. So if you had a long-term care plan, you could, to qualify for your benefits, you would have what are called activities of daily living. And if you lost 2 or 3 of those activities of daily living, depending upon the type of plan that you had, you would trigger your benefit. So if you lost the ability to bathe yourself, have somebody wipe your backside, dressing, feeding, transferring in and out of bed to a chair, something like that. If you lost 2 or 3 of those abilities of activity of daily living, then you would trigger your benefit. Or in the case of my father, if you had a cognitive impairment, such as dementia or Alzheimer's. And in the case of my father, dementia is what triggered his long-term care plan to start paying. He could still, in his early stages of dementia, could do all of those activities of daily living. But because he had dementia, that's what triggered it. So once you have either a cognitive impairment or lose 2 or more of activities of daily living, then your benefits start to come in if you've got a long-term care plan. And that's really what the meat of the hamburger is, or the meat of your long-term care plan. Plans are divided into 2 different types. You can get a daily benefit amount, which means that if you go on claim or you start to claim your long-term care benefits, you would receive X number of dollars per day to use towards your care. Some plans have a pool of money, and many group plans, and possibly the plan that you took out through ERS many years ago, if you had one, many of those plans had a pool of money that said once you exhausted that pool of money, then you were out of coverage. Then, like the cheese, kind of the thing that you put, most people put on a burger, length of coverage is another component of a long-term care plan. As I mentioned, a pool of money. That pool of money, once you had exhausted that, then there was no more coverage. Some plans would say, we're going to pay your daily benefit amount for 3 years, 5 years, or for your lifetime, however long that you live. So you had that opportunity that way. Then you had an elimination period. And for those of us who live in Texas, if you live along the coast, you could have a hurricane deductible. You could have a hail deductible on your homeowner's insurance. The amount of money you have to pay out of your pocket first before the homeowner's plan pays for your roof. The elimination period covers the same situation. It's the amount that you have to pay out of your pocket for your care before your long-term care plan kicks in. Most plans have a 90-day wait or a 180-day wait. So you could be responsible for your care for 3 to 6 months before your long-term care plan kicked in. We're going to show you what some of those costs could be in a moment. Then you have location of coverage, which would determine whether you're taken care of at home, in an assisted living facility, or in a nursing home. And then you come in with a couple of different additional riders that are on there available to you. Some are inflation protection that would go up over a period of time. And since we're talking about inflation, I'll show you kind of the impact of inflation on long-term care in Texas right now. But if you took out a policy with ERS many, many years ago, that $100 a day benefit that you took out, or a pool of money that you had, may not have kept up with inflation. And so you want to make sure that you review that. And then some plans have the ability to give you non-skilled care. Now, in the case of my father, early on in his early dementia, like I said, he could do all of the things, all of his activities of daily living. His problem was he would get up in the middle of the night and magically think he was an electrician and try to do work in the house that he was not qualified for. My stepmother still worked, so she needed someone to come in and just basically sit up in case my dad got up and was an injury risk. That's a non-skilled service, or somebody could come in and cook, things like that. Some plans have that, some don't have that. It's important to understand, for those of you that do have a long-term care plan, what your plan covers. But these are some traditional components of a long-term care plan. And as we go forward, we'll kind of break them down just a little bit for you as well. But what is extended care? Extended care or elder care or long-term care is a huge pool of different ideas, different concepts. It encompasses care in your home, care in a nursing home or a long-term care facility like my father had, but it also encompasses that middle ground, care in assisted living facilities or continuing care communities. Some of these continuing care communities are centered around church or fraternal organizations. Some are centered around, there's one up in Waco that's around retired educators. So some of them, you would go in and you would purchase your unit, and then you would have the ability to, as you needed care, move up progressively. So there's a lot of different ways that are out there that you can take advantage of those things from an extended care perspective that is beyond just going to a nursing home. And how you pay for extended care is so different. You can pay for it out of your personal assets, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. You can pay for it assistance for family and friends. You can enter the Medicaid program. We're going to talk briefly about Medicaid. Or you can have some form of extended care coverage that would provide that care for you. And we're going to go through and show you your different options as you go through here, because you never know who needs this. And as we age, we start to lose that ability to do things which we weren't able to do for ourselves before. And so think about this from a timeline perspective. We're all on this timeline in terms of age. There's going to be some magical point that we cross on that timeline where we can't do certain things for ourselves anymore. And we're going to need some form of care, whether it's at home, from a family member, something like that. We don't know in the future when that's going to happen. And so you never know what's going to happen. My father's situation, he was 78 when he went into a nursing home for the first time out in Marble Falls. I noticed out there whenever I saw him that there were people that were younger than 50 in the nursing home he was in. And I got to thinking, why is that? So I'd asked some of the nurses and the age there, and they said, these are people that had a stroke in their 40s. There were some people there that had had an auto accident and had traumatic brain injury in their 30s. So you never know when you may need some type of long-term care. And the younger you are, you may be healthy body-wise, but need care for a mental situation. So again, you don't know when you're going to need it there. And a lot of times people think, well, I've got great health insurance. And as state employees, you have phenomenal health care in your coverage, as well as the way the state provides for the costs, things like that. Most people think that they've got long-term care in that. Most people think that Medicare or Medicare supplements cover long-term care costs. Both the private insurance sector or the group plans that you have, as well as Medicare, and there are different supplements, things like that, and Medicare Advantage plans, they do not cover long-term care costs. I'm going to show you the little bit amount that is covered, but as a whole, most care is not provided for through health insurance or any type of Medicare coverage as well. Some people think, well, Medicare is the same as Medicaid. I can just jump on that if I need to. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then as I addressed before, some people think I'm too young to buy. I'm still an active employee. I'm just in my 50s or in my 40s. I'm too young to buy. I'm going to show you what the cost of waiting is. But as we talked about before, we don't know when that magic line we're going to cross over, be it through accident or age, when we're no longer able to take care of ourselves. So you can take advantage of the opportunity that way. So I want to show you what the national cost of care is. And while I'm doing this, I want you to grab a pen because I'm going to give you a website to look up here. This is a national look by Mutual of Omaha, one of the top providers of long-term care a few years ago, looked at cost by type of care, home health aid, assisted living facility, semi-private room, or private room in a nursing home. And you can see out there it's about $25 an hour for a home health aid nationally, $6,000 a month nationally for a one-bedroom private occupancy assisted living facility. Once you get into the nursing home facilities, you're over $100,000 a year nationally for a semi-private room. For a private room, over $122,000 a year. For my father, he was in a very nice facility out in Marble Falls and as well as in Austin in his final few months of living. Wasn't the Taj Mahal by any stretch of the imagination, but it was about $6,000 a month for a semi-private room. And so it was pretty expensive. It was a situation to where my stepmother and my father could have dipped into their retirement savings. But fortunately, my father had a long-term care plan that paid every dime of his needs that he needed for that long-term care. Now, what I want you to look at now is in Texas. This is a breakdown. I've shown this slide in the past. What I've done this time is I've added Wichita Falls to kind of give you a more rural look at what the costs are out there. But what I want you to look at in red especially is the change just since December of last year in the cost of care in your area. I want you to write down Genworth, GENWORTH.com. Go out and look at the website. You can plug in their cost of care, their cost of aging. They've got a little widget out there. You can plug in the city, the zip code. For those of you who are joining us out of state, you can also look anywhere in the country, and it will break down for you and show you what the cost is. And you can see in Austin, and for those of you who live in Austin, you know Austin is growing like crazy. The cost of care is going up just as much that way as well, 25%. So you're looking at $9,000 a month for a private room in Austin on average right now. And that's gone up 25% just in the past 6 months. Houston, conversely, has gone down or stayed flat, which I don't know if that's because we have more facilities that are out there or what the situation was. Back during COVID, especially during the peak, you saw a lot of people taking their parents out of assisted living facilities, out of a semi-private nursing home room situation and trying to bring them home. So you did have some situations to where there was more capacity. Dallas-Fort Worth is going back up the same as well. So this can kind of give you just a real good look out there at what the cost of care is. And now all of us on the call, if you're a state employee, you've got a state pension that you're building towards, that you are either are receiving on. With that state pension, you don't know, or if you have to have care, you can't call the pension board and say, hey, can you double up my payment because I've got to go into long-term care. So there are a lot of situations to where you may have to pull money from different places. So, Ann, you want to jump in here on something real quick?
Right. Thank you, John. What I wanted to tell the people on the webinar is that if you go to the Genworth website, the survey is under Aging and You. So if you click on Aging and You, and on the right-hand side, there's a subtitle that says Aging and Your Finances, Cost of Care. And that is where you can find the information John is talking about.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So like I said, go out there and play around. It's a really neat widget. When I was preparing for this webinar, I wanted to just double check the prices and see what's out there and add Wichita Falls. Once I started putting in Austin and Houston, I started noticing the significant increases that were out there. Now, Cheryl, you asked a question about once you lock in a price, does it go up from there? I'm going to go two different directions for you in that conversation. Most long-term care plans are designed, when I say long-term care insurance plans are designed to give you a flat rate and hoping that it's going to stay that way for the life of your coverage. Deep down in the fine print, they will tell you that if they experience claims larger than expected, they can take a whole group of people and raise their rates. They won't do it individually. They'll take a whole group or whole rating class of people and raise their rates. So yes, it can change. There are some plans that Dan is more experienced with that don't raise their rates as much or lock in, but they are plans that are designed to give you a very specific period of time, very specific period of money. Now, from the cost of care, I know with my father, whenever we signed him up, they would often say that this rate for his room and care is guaranteed for 6 months or guaranteed for a period of time. So when it comes to the care side, usually they'll guarantee you a certain period of time, almost like a rent in an apartment. From a long-term care planning, from an insurance side, usually they will say it can be raised in a certain class. So that's a good question. We'll continue to answer questions. Deanna, are there anything else that we need to address at this time before we move forward?
Those are the only questions that have not been answered. So you're doing a great job. Thanks.
Appreciate that. And we'll come back. Some of you have raised your hands. At the end, we're going to stop recording and answer those raised hand questions, but keep those going over that way as well. So let's talk about what we've seen, where care can be provided. Let's talk about, we've seen the components of long-term care plans, and we've seen what the cost in Texas on average is, just that I checked earlier this week. Let's talk about how you pay for it. Most people, and when I say most, the vast majority of people will pay out of pocket. They use their own personal savings, whether it be some of their pension money, some of their Texas Saver Plan, IRAs, 401ks, whatever it is. The challenge is you may not want to tap those funds when you have to take them out, because you could be right now, if you needed it, you could be cashing in funds that have just dropped 20, 30% in value in terms of the stock market out of your 401k, pulling it out that way. Some people, especially in land-rich Texas, may have family land that you have to trigger the sale of an asset or incur taxes on it, things like that. Some people say, well, I'll just use Medicaid. I will tell you, as a state employee, Medicaid is extremely hard to qualify for because you have a pension benefit. It's truly a last resort program with limited assets that requires you to spend down all your assets. Sometimes they'll do a 5-year look back period, all that kind of fun stuff where they'll say, did you try to hide mom's assets before you put her on Medicaid? And the state will usually come back and seek reimbursement after your loved one has passed away and been cared for. Now, from a practical standpoint, I watched this with my father in Marble Falls at his facility. There were 3 wings at his facility. 2 of them were private payer wings, meaning that there was long-term care or they were paying it out of their own assets. Those wings had higher staff to patient ratios. To me, it seemed that there were more active, more activities going on, things like that. And then there was a Medicaid wing that didn't seem to have the number of aides and nurses and things like that that I would want to put someone in. So just consider that from a practical standpoint. So there's a lot of ways that people pay. In long-term care 201, we're going to break that down and show the impact financially. If you have to quit your job, what that would mean to take care of your parents, how much it would cost you in that regard. So we talk about Medicare, and I want to come in and even with your ERS, with your healthcare advantage plan that's all tied into Medicare, that type of thing. Medicare has a very, very strict policy on the type of care that they provide. Long-term care, however you want to define it, skilled nursing care is really how Medicare defines it. If you have an accident, a procedure, or a medical situation to where you have to go to the hospital and then need skilled care following that hospital visit, Medicare has some provisions where they will pay for the first 20 days of your skilled care at 100% of the cost. After that, for the next 80 days, up to 100 days, you have to pay a copay towards that, and then Medicare will pay the difference. It was $185 and change last year. It's $190 something this year. But after day 100, whether you continue to need skilled nursing care, whatever the situation is, Medicare stops paying for that. And I'll show you some stats and when we talk about long-term care 201 that blow me away at the number of people who have to leave a nursing facility, a skilled nursing care facility, at 100 days because nobody else is paying for it out there. In the case of my father, what happened was he finally had a stroke that he had to go into the hospital for and have major surgery. He spent multiple days in the hospital. He was discharged and went to a skilled nursing facility just around the corner in downtown Austin, where he spent about 3 weeks there learning to get back on his feet, feed himself, walk, take care of himself, go to the restroom, that type of thing. During that period, Medicare paid 100% for all of that. Then he was transferred out to the nursing home facility where his long-term care plan started kicking in to pay, and Medicare paid a little bit. Then after 100 days, his long-term care plan paid for 100% of his care. So that's how it worked that way. But let me show you how a little, in my way I say it, an insidious way that Medicare and even Medicare Advantage plans, because they follow the same Medicare procedures, get around paying for any type of skilled nursing care. And this is called observation status in a hospital. So if you notice on the previous slide, it talked about a 3-day stay in the hospital. Medicare classifies every procedure based on a code. And for those of you who are joining us that are in the medical field, you understand every procedure has a code. And every procedure has a code that says this is an inpatient stay or this is an outpatient or an observation status situation. If your procedure is coded as an observation status procedure, you could still spend 3 nights in a hospital. But if it's observation status and Medicare says that's an observation status procedure, there is no coverage for your skilled recovery care after you leave the hospital. So Medicare can just simply by stroke of a pen change a procedure that may have been a inpatient procedure last year, like say a knee replacement surgery or shoulder replacement surgery, to an outpatient observation status. You still get the same care in the hospital. What you miss is you miss the after skilled care after the fact. And so there's some really big challenges that jump in and who pays what and what they pay for. And that's what Deanna and her team can answer for you what is paid in those situations. Now, Deanna, I see you typing away feverishly and I see some questions. Are there some specific questions that have come in regarding this that we want to address as a group?
Yes. So basically, and I'm sorry, I didn't have it on mute, so you could probably hear my fingers clicking too. So I apologize for that. But there were several questions coming in talking about they had heard a facility that was rejecting this long-term care insurance. I have not, and then Ray also mentioned he has not ever found a long-term care facility that rejected any of the long-term care coverage insurance programs. So we just wanted to clarify that. And then you answered the question they asked about price increases. You answered that. Someone had just mentioned that they had a CNA long-term care and that the cost had doubled for them when they turned 50. And so they had to inadvertently drop that program. So we do have some programs that could probably help with that might have a better cost and still give you the coverage that you need. And then the one that I was typing so feverishly about was someone was asking, would a traditional insurance versus doing a guaranteed investment account or a cash indemnity account, which would be best? There are 2 ways to pay for long-term care. You can pay for it yourself or you can have the insurance pay for it. If you qualify, my recommendation is to have a long-term care insurance plan and save your savings. If not, we do have an investment program as well through TPEA and AMBA that can help cover that for you. And so you basically self-insure yourself if you don't qualify.
Exactly. Great questions. Keep those questions coming. Thank you, Deanna. That's why I encourage you, that QR code on there, use your camera feature, hover over that. You can get specific questions. One thing I'll mention to a couple of those questions, those of you who have a plan, please, please, please do not cancel that plan if you can. Let Deanna and her team review that. You may have some benefits that you've already earned inside of there, some non-forfeiture benefits that may give you some level of coverage. You may have some provisions that would allow you to reduce your premium or reduce your coverage and still maintain your policy. So let Deanna and her team review that for you. And then the other thing, the question about, do facilities not take long-term care insurance? I will tell you, when my stepmother and I went out looking for facilities, once they find out that you are a private payer, meaning that you are a long-term care company's paying, they will jump over the desk to try to make sure that you are comfortable in their facility. They would rather deal with private payer situation insurance than anything Medicare, Medicaid, trying to figure out. So they are more than comfortable coordinating benefits. And we're going to talk a little bit about coordinating benefits here in just a moment. So great questions. Keep them coming. Let's roll on here, because as we led into and Deanna led to, and your questions have led to, this other solution is spending pennies on the dollar to have some sort of a plan that can supplement your out-of-pocket expenses. Because in the case of my father, my stepmother still had living expenses. She still worked. The house, the taxes did not come due on the house just because my father went into a nursing home facility. It allowed my stepmother to still maintain her standard of living. It allowed my brother and I to still pay for our kids' college because we didn't have to bring money out of our pocket to take away from my father's grandkids to pay for his care. You can supplement it. You can protect those assets. If he had anything he was going to pass down to us, he could protect that, protect family land, things like that. But most importantly, it keeps you in control of how you want to be taken care of. We kept my father at home as long as he was safe to himself and as long as my stepmother could provide care for him. He was much more comfortable at home. The struggle, the emotional struggle that we went through moving him to a facility and seeing that transition on him mentally and emotional was tough. But we knew we could no longer provide the care that he needed around the clock for him. A good long-term care plan can give you control over where and how you want to be taken care of, because a good long-term care plan has stay-at-home benefits. And this is so crucial. When you have a long-term care plan, an internal care coordinator within the company, that if you have to go on claim, they would prefer you to stay at home. If you can modify your home with some pull bars or some equipment or lowering a range, a stovetop that you can cook, things like that, they will provide money for that, provide money to widen doors, put ramps in, things of that nature. Some plans have coverage that can provide you with somebody to come in and cook meals, do some light cleaning, things like that, and then start to do some of those skilled care like rehabilitation services, a visiting home health care nurse, changing, wiping backsides, those kind of things. So as you build your plan, and Deanna and her team can help you do this, you can get that control that you want, that you desire by having some of those stay-at-home benefits. And then you can build a plan that gives you just a lump sum of cash that you can use however you want to. That cash comes right away, and you can use that to kind of stabilize the situation before you start to then tap into other assets and decide when do we want to start spending down out of a 401k, something like that. Some people, and I had this conversation with my brother when talking about my mom, maybe we want to use that cash to have somebody from her church move in to be with her for at least a year until we take care of her affairs and have to maybe move her to a long-term care facility. And then some plans, they will simply reimburse you what your actual costs are on a daily basis and send the check directly to the nursing facility. So there's different types of plans that are out there for that, different type of plans that can take care of those needs. But the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets and the harder it becomes to qualify for. I talked about that timeline that we're all on. We don't know that day when we're not eligible anymore. And so as you get older, it gets more difficult to qualify for because chronic health issues pop up, family history goes into it. It's harder for me to qualify for a plan because of my father's dementia, the family history, that type of thing pops in as well. And then it gets more expensive the longer you wait. I don't want you to worry about these numbers because these numbers don't really apply to anybody in particular. Just know that the more years you wait, it goes up in cost and can cost you more out of your pocket that way. But there are other options than just long-term care plans. There are plans that give you shorter periods of coverage, meaning just a 1-year type of plan that maybe keeps you at home. You can get weekly benefit amounts. You can get plans that just, if you've got a long-term care plan, that just cover your elimination period. So in the case that you saw there, if you're in Austin, you don't have to come up with $27,000 out of your pocket before your long-term care plan kicks in. You could have a plan that just covers that 90 days and puts that money back into your pocket that way. You can get it at home as opposed to a nursing facility. After COVID, we saw people say, I don't want to put mom or dad into a facility. I want to keep them at home, or to have those non-skilled service people come out and take care of you as well. There's so many different type of plans that TPEA endorses, that AMBA has done tremendous research on, that Deanna and her team can give you to show you what your options are. If you have a plan, if you don't have a plan, if you're not sure, there could be some options out there for you as well. So I want you to put the questions into chat. We're going to wrap up with a couple of housekeeping details. Then I'm going to unmute or stop recording and unmute those of you who maybe want to ask a question live. If you've got suggestions on what you'd like us to talk about in the third quarter, shoot those to us. Send those in to TPEA. I'll give you my email address in a moment. You can go out and look at all the old webinars out there that we've had, but we're putting together the third quarter presentations for you, the webinar conversations going forward. Please, please, please tell your friends, your coworkers about these webinars. It's a great way to introduce them to TPEA, help them join, help us increase our numbers, get that strong so that when legislative season rolls around next January, we've got many more members that we can go to the Capitol and say, hey, cost of living, across the board pay raises, working conditions, things like that. Here's our voice out there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here. I'm going to put this QR code up there, my email address up there.